Welcome to the Marketing Made Great podcast. In each episode, we'll be sharing with you the tips, tricks, and techniques from the top sales and marketing experts from around the globe that will make marketing simple for your business. Here's your host, Mark Traeger.
I want to welcome you today to the Marketing Made Great podcast, and I'm really excited about our guest today. We have John Ray of Ray Business Advisors here in our studio at Atlanta Tech Park, and he kind of believes that your price is too low. Now, when I saw that, I thought that was kind of unusual, and it's something we want to talk about today, but he's also the owner of the North Fulton studio of Business Radio X and is the host of the North Fulton Business Radio. Now, John, one of the things I want to talk about today is, how pricing affects marketing, or does it? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm, Ray Business Advisors?
Sure. Thank you. So, I've got a background in investment banking, investment management, strategic advisory. I started Ray Business Advisors as an outside CFO firm. And increasingly, what I saw is problems in pricing and problems that people have, not just people out there, but me. Okay.
Sure.
And so part of it is our own journeys that we have. Right. And so that's one reason that I've gradually morphed my practice into doing more pricing consulting with business owners.
Okay,
and
so
go ahead. No, I was just going to say I do a lot of speaking engagements and workshops around pricing and other related topics.
Okay, so here's the question that I think from my side of the fence, being a marketer, how do you know your price is too low?
Great question. Your price is too low if you're working too hard for too little money.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think most business owners down in the trenches, looking down in their business, don't necessarily see that when it's happening, right? And so I think that's it has to be pointed out to them. I think another way to know is if you're getting 100% of your proposals accepted, then your price is too low. I mean, you need rejection. Rejection is a good thing in moderation,
of course,
right? Because it helps you get to a better steady state on your pricing.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the common myths or assumptions that many business owners make about pricing?
Well, one is that price customers are not price sensitive. They're that they're actually value sensitive. Most business owners think it's all about the price, right, and that's how people make decisions. And that's not how any of us make decisions when we go to a store, let's say.
We buy emotionally.
We buy emotionally, and we buy based on brand. Here we get into marketing, right? We buy based on brand, perception, nostalgia, identification. I mean, if you give me a baseball cap with my favorite baseball team's logo on it, right, then that has a different value to me than one that's plain. That's so, true. But it's the same commodity, if you will, two totally different value systems that it springs up for me.
So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously a price affects profit and losses, but does it affect other things as well? I mean, what are some of the other things that it affects beyond just profit and loss?
Well, it affects perception of your product, right? So prices send signals, and they send good signals and they send bad signals. So if I come to you, Mark, and say, hey, out here in the parking lot of Atlanta Tech Park, I drove in a Tesla that I want to sell to you for $2,500. Right. Then the first thought you would have to me is there's something wrong with this, right? Exactly. Either I stole it or it's got a mechanical problem or right, there's some issue, right? That's what happens when your price is too low. You send bad signals.
Right. I
to
mean,
people.
it's perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a good example from my side is I'm a professional outdoorsman in my sideline business, so to speak, or my side hustle. And one of the things I used to do is run a one-day fly fishing school here in Atlanta for many years. But I thought if I, sold it at $99 a piece, the phone would ring off the hook.
Right.
Well, the funny part about that is I raised it to actually $245, and the phone did ring off the hook because nobody would call at $99. They thought something was wrong with it. But as soon as I raised the price, all of a sudden the value increased, and boom, there we were. I had more people than I could really service a lot of times.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good lesson for businesses as well, is sometimes just being cheap is not necessarily the best way to go.
No, but the default for a lot of businesses is to market that way. If I'm not getting enough clients, let me discount, right? And that'll get me more clients, and that's not the way to approach the problem.
No, I agree. From my perspective, pricing, if you're going to be just like everybody else, then it's, whoever's going to have the lowest price is going to win. We're not necessarily cheapest when it comes to marketing, but we're also, too, not the most expensive. Like you said, it's the perceived value of whatever that price is that the customer's looking for, I think, is the most important.
Well, absolutely. And what I would tell you is that somebody that hires you, for example, to change their marketing approach, change their branding, and you go out and do a great job for them, you've increased their sales by 10x or whatever, right. Are they going to go to the cocktail party and brag about, I got the cheapest marketing guy in Atlanta? No. Right. What they're going to brag about is the job you did.
Right.
So how about just pricing it based on the value that you've helped that client extract?
Right. And like you said, too, we can't win every battle.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think a lot of times people make the assumption that they have to do business with everybody. And they really don't.
No.
And I think part of that, too, is helping them understand that the value that you bring is much more than just the price.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the value is hidden. And what I mean by that, Mark, is our customers have value propositions about everything that they buy, including our services, that we don't even take into account.
Right.
I mean, for example, if I'm a financial advisor, let's say, and I'm trying to get business from someone, they may have an issue floating in the back of their mind that says, hey, my knucklehead son-in-law is doing my financial advisory work right now. I want to get rid of him, but I'm going to have to tell my wife about this, right? And I really don't want to have to go through that pain. That's something that has nothing to do with my features and benefits, but it's a big sticking point for me.
Yeah, no, and I understand that and can appreciate that. So is there kind of like a good strategy or a rule of thumb to use when you determine a price for a product or service in your mind?
Well, it comes out of a conversation you have to have with a client. And it's a value conversation, and the value conversation is let's talk about what this project means for you and your business, both your business and what does it mean for you personally. But particularly if you're dealing with a small to medium-sized business, where the results of that business go directly to that owner's bottom line. That's the conversation that you want to have, and that involves really getting into the whys. Why are we sitting here today? Why are we having this conversation? What does it mean to you if this project is successful? What will it enable you to do? And that's a conversation to have that gets you to the bottom line of what that value is. And the more you can get that value in the mind of your customer, the better you can receive a price that reflects that value, which I find inevitably is going to be higher than the one you've got in your head.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I discovered too, a lot of times people in business don't necessarily know how to price a product. They don't plan on wholesale, they don't plan on distribution and so forth like that when it comes to figuring out that price. So do you have kind of like a process or a methodology that you use to help the businesses that you work with come up with a price?
Well, first of all, what I say is it's not necessarily based on competition. It's not necessarily based on, what your costs are per se, although you obviously have to price at a point where your revenue exceeds your cost, obviously. But what I find is if you understand customer value, and there's a couple of ways to get there, and this is where a guy like you really brings a whole lot of value to this whole process, because you really need to understand whether you're B2C or B2B. It's kind of there's two different aspects to it. But survey your customers, have conversations with your customers, customer discovery. What's important to my customers, right? And if it's a B2C business, that's a different conversation, a different method of doing that. There's a lot of surveys involved and so forth. With B2B, there's a lot more one-on-one personalization of that conversation. But having those conversations is really the way to get at that value, and then understand, and then price from there.
Well, and that's part of the formula, I think, too. But also too, I think a lot of businesses miss the estimation of cost when they are manufacturing a product, as well as calculating, if you're a service company, how many hours it's going to take to put something together for a client. That's kind of the thing that I think a lot of businesses miss, is effectively pricing their cost. And I'm sure that's something that you can probably help them with as well, right?
Sure. Yeah, and you can, cost is a great baseline to figure out where you need to be price-wise, right? And there are a whole lot of companies out there that cheat the future, I'll call it.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
They borrow against the future
Sure.
to service today's business, and they're really digging themselves a big hole and don't even know it. So, I hear what you're saying on that point, for sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of those, if they haven't done the homework on cost, which is probably the easiest homework to do, frankly, then I know they haven't done the homework on what the values of the customers are. I mean, that generally goes hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a client, there's so many stories that I can tell you as well as you, but we had a client one time that had a product that they had a patent on, and it was waterproof dirt, and it can be impregnated with just about anything, whether it be an attractant or a deterrent. And I remember seeing them at a show, and they were selling it for $9.95 and got no reaction with it at all. I encouraged them to 2.5 times that price to $24.95. They thought I was out of my mind. But they did it at the next show and sold out, because it's the perceived value. But being a patented product, they have no competition, so they control the pricing.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people sometimes forget that about market position and so forth. You don't necessarily, or do you have to be the cheapest to compete?
It's hard to be the cheapest. So let me give you an example. I mean, you have one that does it well, but if you want to be this kind of business, great. But Aldi does it very well. They're cheaper than Walmart in a lot of their price points. But if you look at their income statement and you look at their operations, they run a very tight operation all the way down the line. They have minimal employees. They have a limited inventory. So They don't offer what Walmart offers inventory-wise. They even make you put a quarter in to get the shopping cart, right? So the point is that if you want to run a business like that, cool. But most people don't have the discipline to do that. Most small and medium-sized business owners, I don't.
Right.
And I don't want to run a business like that, right?
Sure.
So that's if you want that kind of business, you can be the lowest cost provider and play that game. I find it much easier to go into a situation where I'm pricing based on the value that I provide, and I have to worry less about what my costs are that way.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, most people don't know this, but the second largest retailer behind Walmart is Costco. Think about it. You have to pay to shop there.
Right. That's right.
Okay? You have to pay to have that privilege to even buy their product line. But their signature brands, the Kirkland brand, is second to none. And they're one of the largest wine manufacturers and distributors in the world. And again, it always boggles my mind that you have to pay for the privilege to shop there, which I love to do because the value is significant.
Sure.
But not only from their brands, but from the national brands that are distributed through there as well. So, all right. So pricing is one of those things that, is always, I think, driving sales and frustrating people. So surely you charge everybody by the hour, don't you?
That was a setup. I love that.
No.
Yeah. I love the way you got into that. If there's anything that drives me nuts, it's hourly pricing. And you know what? It drives our customers nuts.
Right.
So if you're a professional services provider and you're pricing by the hour, I can tell you that you're not making enough money for what you do. Because, quite frankly, the value of what you provide, which comes out of your head, your gray matter, cannot be measured in minutes or hours. And by the way, as a customer of hourly billing professional services firms, I hate it. I hate it because I don't understand how they got there, right? And I hate surprise bills. We all hate that. So if you're in that position, why keep doing that to people, right? So now the natural pushback that I get from that is, okay, terrific. How do I make that change? Well, the way you make that change is to value price. And you value price by understanding what the value of the project is. So what are you delivering to the client that they value?
Right.
And how do you capture a portion of that value?
Absolutely. And I think one of the best stories I've ever heard about value is imagine you're this cruise liner with 6,000 people dead stopped in the middle of the ocean. They can't get the motor restarted for days. So they helicopter out an old codger that goes down into the engine room. And this engine is the size of a 3-story building. He analyzes it for about an hour and a half to 2 hours and asks for a ball-peen hammer, walks over, strikes it twice, and the engine fires up. And they're amazed at it. Then when they get the bill for $100,000, they go, oh my gosh, that's just dumb. I can't pay that. You only were here for an hour and a half, and you just 2 hammer blows. And he looks at him and says, yeah, I understand that. You're right. Just to put the 2 hammer hits was $2,000. Knowing where to hit it is $998,000.
Exactly.
And a lot of times what you're investing in when you can, work with a firm such as yourself is the years and years of experience that will short circuit their success. And that's really what you're investing in when you pay on price is somebody's, I guess the best way to, a good example is, or to describe it, is to say that you're paying for a practitioner, somebody that knows what they're doing, has done it thousands of times, versus a keyboard jockey that's read a few articles and thinks he knows what to do. So that's kind of the way I look at things is, am I working with a practitioner or am I looking at a keyboard jockey that thinks they may know? So I think to me, that's the difference. I think what businesses should be, projecting and working towards and pricing.
No question. I mean, you should be pricing expertise, not the process of execution, right? Because as you say, there's a whole lot of people out there that, I mean, let's take attorneys, for example. I mean, I'm working with an attorney right now to make the move to a value pricing model. He's competing against LegalZoom and the contract mills, I'll call them. Right. And so, but the value he brings is he's had years of experience. He's seen everything, been there, done that. He's seen all the mistakes not only he's made, but others have made. And he brings that to the table. Right. That's the kind of business attorney that a lot of clients want to deal with. They want an advisor, not just an attorney. Right. And so pricing based on his expertise, not based on a time increment that has no relation to that expertise, absolutely makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that there are things that, the unspoken things that you pay for, but also, too, it's not always about the features and benefits. Right. It's some of that expertise that you're paying for that makes the difference. So, the evolution of pricing and marketing and everything is always changing. So the question I like to always ask a guest is, what sort of books or blogs or podcasts or YouTube channels are you reading or watching to kind of use as inspiration or insight as you grow your practice?
Well, as you might imagine, I love podcasts. Sure. So, I love, there are two, in terms of pricing, there are two individuals I could name that are I think are really, they're kind of, you might call them the godfathers of this, of this whole discipline. Alan Weiss, who's written a number of books. He has a weekly podcast, and he's fantastic for professional service providers. He's a consultant. He talks in that language to consultants, but the advice he gives could be applied to any B2B professional service provider. Ronald Baker is a legend in the value pricing field. I would strongly recommend his books and the work that he does. Another fellow I love is Jonathan Stark. He's got a great podcast on called Ditching Hourly. I'm a regular fan of his work. So there's a lot of great thought leaders out there that I think could be helpful.
Okay. So as we start to wind down a little bit here, I guess my question to you is there one or two nuggets that you can leave with our audience when it comes to pricing that they can look at and implement right now that will help them grow their business?
Well, the homework for your listeners is go raise your price 1% today, okay? Okay, so the average business in this country, if they raise their price by 1%, their bottom line goes up 9%.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's not my numbers. That's McKinsey Consultants, and that's what they've determined. So think about if you can raise your price just a few percentage points, what might happen to your bottom line. Now, and if your customers notice that, you've got the wrong customers, okay? So that's something you can do this afternoon that will help your business.
Okay.
Another thing I would say is that ask your customers why they do business with you. What do they value? Start that conversation if you haven't. If you've been doing business with somebody for a while, don't assume. Ask them why they keep doing business with you. Even if you're in retail, please take the time to do that. Quit talking about the weather or the sports, and ask somebody while you're at the register, hey, why did you come in today? Why did you come here as opposed to going across the street?
Right. You and I were on a panel recently, and that's how we met. And I think both of us pointed out to the group that was there that it makes it real easy to raise prices when you're constantly in front of your customers, and you're also too showing them how you're increasing the value on a regular basis without necessarily raising the price every time you add a feature or a benefit or a service. As long as they see constant improvement in the product or service, they're not going to really balk too much at when you start adding a 3, 5, or 10% price increase, because they constantly see that you bring value to what it is they're doing.
That's a wonderful point. And you know what I saw, example I saw that recently. I just got the email. In fact, I saved the email from Amazon. And
okay.
they're priming me, pardon the pun, Mark.
Right.
They sent an email, and all that email had in it was the features that they've added for Prime customers over the last year. And it was a long email with all these features. And some of those didn't really cost a lot of money, but they were just add-ons. And they're priming me for a price increase, right? Because when I read that, I feel pretty good about being a Prime customer of Amazon. So if you don't have that conversation with your clients, then you're not able to do what you suggest, which is to surprise and delight, because you don't know what's going to surprise and delight your clients. In fact, very little things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money to surprise and delight, right? So
I mean, it's a simple matter of, sending them information about their marketplace that you are aware of that's going on, lets them know that, hey, he's actually paying attention to me and is constantly looking for ways to help me. That's really what customers really want,
right,
is to know that they're loved and appreciated. Because honestly, that's the biggest thing why customers leave, is they don't feel loved and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like being taken for granted.
And they're showing people you appreciate them and that you want to help them. They're just, sometimes that's just a phone call,
Absolutely.
And a phone call costs nothing. So it's surprising the small number of things that you need to add to your offering and to your regular process, if you will. That'll help your clients love you.
Okay, so what you're telling everybody right now is it's time to raise your price. America, it's time to raise your price.
It is. Let's do it.
Well, and it's fair and reasonable. So in order for them to effectively raise their price, they're going to need some help.
Yep.
So in that vein, how would they get a hold of you to help you be their guide in effectively raising their prices and growing their business?
Well, thank you for asking that question. So if to engage with me, you can go to my website, raybusinessadvisors.com. You can call 404-287-2627, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Is a great place to connect with me on social media. I post there every weekday morning. I've got something there to digest. John Ray, JOHNRAY 1 on LinkedIn.
Well, John, it's been a pleasure having you out to our studios here at Atlanta Tech Park. And thanks for really putting a different spin on marketing when it comes to pricing. Look forward to listening to your radio show on the North Fulton Business Radio. So thanks so much for coming out.
Mark, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
You bet. Take care now.
Thank you.
With today's attention-driven economy, many small businesses are pushing aside marketing or making marketing less of a priority as they get busier and busier. think most companies view marketing as an expense and not as an investment in the growth of their business. The reality is that there's nothing more important than marketing to the vitality of your business long term. You have to keep telling your story and blowing loud your own horn so your passion for what you do shines through all the clutter and noise that we listen to every day. So with that said, we want to hear from you about the amazing things you're doing to get the word out about your company and how you're drawing attention to what it is you sell or do. Now, that's something you're doing intentionally or maybe even by accident that worked to bring in more customers. We want to brag on you. So here's how you can do that. Simply email us at team@csmediagroup.com and share a quick overview of your story in writing. Share your story so we can brag on you here at the Marketing Made Great podcast. Now, the best part is that your story will not only encourage others, but could very well translate it into a win from you to a win for someone else. So email us today at team@csmediagroup.com about your success story, and we'll get back to you right away. Who knows? We may even ask you to record your story right here on the Marketing Made Great podcast to be an inspiration to others. So contact us today. We're looking forward to hearing your story right away. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Marketing Made Great podcast. If you want more details about today's show and the resources mentioned, go to www.csmediagroup.com/podcast. Please be sure to send us your comments about the show and follow the link in the show notes to give us your suggestions for future show topics. With your help, we'll continue to only get better. Now, you can contact us directly with your topics at podcasttopics@csmediagroup.com as well if you'd like. Be sure right now to stop everything and subscribe to the show in iTunes or on your favorite podcast source so you never miss an episode of the Marketing Made Great podcast. While you're there, write us a positive review if you like the show. Also, we're going to ask that you spread the word to your friends about this podcast by visiting us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram with all your comments. Now, when you're posting, be sure to use our hashtag #MarketingMadeGreat when posting so we can add to the discussion online and all the social media platforms. Now, our show is produced in our studios located in Atlanta, Georgia's premier business accelerator, Atlanta Tech Park. I'm your host, Mark Traeger, and I want to thank you so much again for taking the time to listen to this week's episode of the Marketing Made Great podcast.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.